So hi everybody, if you're just joining us now for tonight's 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time live cast, you're in the right place. We will give people about a minute to find us, which is customary, and while we're doing that, I am going to bounce this over to my personal page and tag Dr. Orisha here, Dr. O as she is fondly known, and we'll hope that more of you are able to join us. So if you could just stand by for a minute if you're already here. And if you're just finding us, welcome. You are in the right place. Okay. So just getting some things set up technically here before we start. It looks like some people are with us now. And throughout the live cast, if you do have a comment or a question at any time you may want to post, I will do my best here to monitor it and bring it into the flow of the conversation. So once again, welcome everybody to Mindful Ohio and the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. I'm Dr. Jamie Marich, and I am very happy to be joined tonight by one of my favorite people, Dr. Orisha Bowers, Dr. O, who I've known now for several years. Orisha is a dancing mindfulness facilitator. She's also an affiliate trainer. And she came and took the training with me in 2015, and I just saw so much spark and light and passion for dance and how to integrate dance and the amazing work that she does in the world, which she'll be talking a little bit more about. And she also works with Institute for Creative Mindfulness as an affiliate trainer. And she's gone on to train many other dancing mindfulness facilitators in her home state of Tennessee and Connecticut. And it's a really cool family dancing mindfulness story that she recently trained her son as a dancing mindfulness facilitator, which just gives me a lot of joy. And I'm so grateful that Orisha agreed to join me tonight to continue these conversations we've been having here at ICM. So Orisha, my sister, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. Thank you.
Oh, it's just so good to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you. So if you would tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do in the world.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Orisha Bowers. I live and work in the great state of Tennessee. I work by day, as I like to say, I always say I come out of the telephone booth to work as a regional director for the Harm Reduction Coalition, National Harm Reduction Coalition. And my project I oversee there is called Help Connect. It is a Southern-facing grant-making opportunity, and we fund organizations in 5 Southern states to do syringe service access, and harm reduction services with the goal of making sure that folks who need access to syringes can get that service. If they need harm reduction services, they can get those services, as well as educating folks on the importance of harm reduction and making sure that we are trying to eliminate the spread of hepatitis C and HIV. So they see it in a nutshell.
Yes.
And of course, by night, not really at night. I work as a sort of I would say a wellness director, a person who uses dancing mindfulness and other healing modalities to help folks who have experienced trauma, who have just come from all walks of life and have different experiences to find their pathway towards wellness.
Wonderful. Yeah, and you've just done so much with being able to integrate dancing mindfulness in whatever work you're doing. I remember when I first met you, you introduced yourself as an HIV/AIDS educator from the Bible Belt. And that just impressed me quite a bit, that you are somebody who believes what you believe, you do what you do in the area of the country I would say needs it the most.
Yeah, man. I cut my teeth as an HIV, a sexual health educator and have sort of used those experiences to kind of inform my own life and my own lived experience in working with people where I meet them, which led me to harm reduction.
Yeah.
As a career path. It really is about meeting people where they are and respecting that they bring lived experience and expertise to their lives, and they just need the information and the resources and tools to be able to make the decisions that work best for them. And so I have what I call a hodgepodge or a buffet of, of tools and resources that I bring to harm reduction, with mindfulness, dancing mindfulness being one of those.
Well, we love our buffets. We use that as a metaphor quite a bit in expressive arts. So I mean, just by way of working definition for people who maybe are new to the concept or they have a lot of preconceived notions about the concept, what would you define as harm reduction? I think you've given us a little bit of an intro to it, but if somebody just point blank asked you, you know, what is harm reduction? How would you define it as an educator?
I would say that harm reduction is a set of tools and strategies that allow us to assist people in their full humanity. It is not addressing people, you know, compartmentalizing their issues, but really looking at the whole person and using all of the resources that we have at our disposal to help them to carry out the decisions that they make for themselves. People are experts on themselves. And so it's really just honoring and recognizing that they really do have the answers to their own challenges and issues, and they just need us to help coach them along. They can actualize all of those decisions and choices.
So some of the work of harm reduction, as you mentioned already, is needle exchange. So can you help us understand a little bit more about what you do with that?
Sure. In particular, we support through the Help Connect program. I'll start with that. This was mostly my work. We support organizations who run needle exchange programs in the southern communities that we're working in. And those folks, we make sure that they have the resources, meaning monetary resources, to purchase safe supplies, syringes, and education, to provide wound care and things of that nature, so that folks are able to, if they choose to use drugs, we're respecting their decision, but giving them tools and strategies to keep themselves safe and healthy in those choices. So that's essentially what it is.
Okay. And can you also help me understand, from your perspective of what you've seen, why there has been such resistance, either culturally or even within a lot of our professional fields, towards harm reduction?
I definitely feel like, so depending upon where you are in the world, and you mentioned earlier, me being in the South in the Bible Belt, there's a lot of religious dogma that is out there around criminalizing and shaming people for certain decisions. There's policies that sort of align with that mode of thinking, and we make behavior a morality issue. We don't always recognize some of the things that people face, the events that have happened in their lives, or just the personal choices that they're making as having influence as to why they do the behaviors that they do. And so I think that a lot of the resistance comes because we don't want to recognize that people they really truly do have autonomy over their own personal bodies, their own lives. We don't always want to honor that. And we feel like harm reduction in particular is, promoting some kind of behavior that is bad. Like we approach things from a punitive standpoint. And prior to starting the call, you use the phrase, "it's all or nothing," right? You have to be way or you can't be. And I think it's more about, harm reduction gives us more of a both and. You can't be recognized in your full humanity without meeting someone else's idea of what it means to be good or good enough. It gives us a platform to say that you are acceptable, you are good enough, regardless of where you fall along the spectrum, whether you are abstaining or whether you are actively using substances. And it opens a window for us to continue to work with people in their place of readiness. No today can just mean not right now, not necessarily forever. And so it gives us more opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to continue to work with folks. And it may be no forever, and that's
Right.
okay.
Right. And I really, really like what you said about both and. That really defines so much of my work and my approach to mental health and training. And so I'm really, really glad you put that out there, the both and. And I mean, the perspective that I am in, and you know this about me, that I am pro 12-step recovery. I am a person in long-term recovery from drugs and alcohol, and the path of abstinence has worked for me. But I have also taken this position of keeping much more of an open mind and open heart to harm reduction over the years. Because I mean, I think I fell into that tendency at first to say, well, abstinence did it for me, so that must be what's right for everyone else. And that's a lot of how people can get schooled in the recovery mode that they choose. And over the years, I've just met people who have benefited from the harm reduction path. And so much of who I am as a person is both and. And I mean, even though I think I can naturally have some concerns in certain areas, I have concerns with people who follow the abstinence path too, to be honest. So I tend to embrace a both and I think one of the most horrible things we do is not welcome people into recovery circles if they are on medically assisted treatment or if they are still using that. I mean, I think we have to be a face of welcome and not just more of the shunning out. So, I mean, I'm really glad we're here having this conversation today, like as I'm in the middle of the book launch, because I mean, I do encourage, more tolerance, especially to medically assisted treatment, more tolerance to needle exchange. And I wouldn't even say tolerance, but just acceptance that this is part of what we need to do in the world to reach as many people as possible.
Right. There's no absolutes in anything that we do, whether we're doing substance treatment, whether we're doing sexual health, whether we're doing religious, spirituality, things like there's no absolutes. And I feel like what harm reduction does in all of these areas, if we take the framework of harm reduction or the approach of harm reduction in any area, it is giving people options. And it allows them to have control. It allows them to do what is best for them in that moment. And we know that people change from moment to moment to moment.
Right.
So my decision is now is going to be a completely different outlook 3 days or 3 years from now.
For sure.
So shutting people, like you said, shutting people out of the process and out of the conversation because we're refusing to open up the options.
Yeah. Shaming, it really is. And I think a lot of people justify it by so-called tough love, but I'm not convinced, because if anything, I've seen the shaming be a bigger factor in keeping people stuck than I've seen like brutal love or tough love do it. And I think you can still practice harm reduction and set boundaries with people.
I agree.
Something can you speak a little bit more to that from your experience?
Absolutely. I feel like, holding people accountable is a part of helping a person to produce behavior change, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm working with someone on a harm reduction plan, for example, I might say to them, these are some options that are available to you. And, we can come back and we can revisit those moments where they chose to use the options that were available, and have another conversation about the times or the moments where they chose not to use the options and why that is, which understanding the why, understanding what promoted the decision that they made, and being open to maybe we need to adjust. Maybe these aren't options, but for me, it's about always keeping the communication channels open. I feel like when you get to this, you must do this, this, and this, and there's no alternatives and there's no conversations, where we see the most detrimental outcomes for people, honestly.
Sure. So for people who are joining us on the Facebook Livecast, you're free to put in a comment or ask a question of Dr. Orisha. I'm watching the comments right now, and thanks to those of you who are joining us. So if I may ask you a devil's advocate question, and I'm curious for you to answer it from your experience. I mean, I think one of the arguments I consistently hear against harm reduction practices is that it takes consequences away from people, it keeps people stuck, it enables I mean, has that been your experience, or do you see that it can be a path forward to some kind of meaningful recovery, however a person may be defining it?
Absolutely. I feel like in my experience, I've met a lot of people who have moved along the spectrum towards what is recovery, right? And there's no instant um, answer, right? I may be on that pathway for quite some time. And once I reach a place where I'm ready to abstain or have some definition of abstain, cut back, slow down, step back, whatever that means for the individual, I have seen people to take that, take that step. And we were ready. We were there when they made that choice. I think, for those who feel like, it should be all or nothing, or that this is, about perpetuating a behavior, like, I don't feel that it's on me necessarily as a provider of any sort to define what is the right outcome. It's for that person. It's for that person to decide what's right for their life. And we know that there are many people, regardless of where they are on the spectrum of use, of active use versus staining, that are able to have very productive lives, that do amazing, impactful work, that are able to function in society in the same ways that somebody who is abstaining is functioning. So it's like, it's not a value judgment. And I feel like sometimes, we want to place a value on one thing and then devalue something else. But for me, I feel like harm reduction allows us to keep people fully human, regardless of where their usage is.
So I'd like to get to the heart of what you titled our talk tonight, which is harm reduction and race, because I mean, it's obvious to me, it might not be so obvious to our listeners, about how much drug policy in this country has been just disproportionately skewed to further criminalize African Americans, especially Black folks, people of color. And it seems to me, from my observation here, that a lot of these anti-harm reduction policies are really setting up minorities to fail even further. Speak to any of that you're feeling called to, and the role of harm reduction here in the Black community.
Absolutely. What I see a lot of times is, issues around enforcement of policies. There's a policy that exists somewhere, and it's really up to the discretion of individuals. I'll use law enforcement for an example, because so much of how we see this perpetuated ends up being folks getting incarcerated or being criminalized. And so this is just a hypothetical, but there are folks out there who will say, yeah, that's my reality. There's a person who may be utilizing harm reduction services to get, get needles and safer use supplies, and they get stopped by an officer. And they're saying to this officer, here's my card, I'm a participant of a harm reduction program, this particular site, and the officer proceeds to confiscate their Narcan, confiscate their syringes, and the person has to go through a court appearance and all of these different things, right? That's one way you can see that same scenario play out. Then there's another person who happens to be white that may not have that same experience. And so for me, the issue comes into like, who is enforcing the different policies, who's informed, how are they held accountable when they don't follow whatever the procedures are for when they encounter a person who's using harm reduction services. It's those very nuanced type of situations where we see race coming into play, where we see people being surveilled. You got two individuals, one happens to be white, one happens to be African American or a person of color. They come out and that officer makes a decision in that moment of how they're going to respond. Those are places where, and these are stories that, our grantees and other folks have shared over time. But these are ways in which I can see race coming into play. You know, folks going to jail for possession of paraphernalia, things like that, that impact people's willingness to use harm reduction services. People use those kinds of stories and narratives to demonize harm reduction programs.
Yeah.
Just all of these various pieces out the opioid crisis language, where you have Black folks who are criminalized and locked up for crack and, you know, selling crack, things like using crack, all of those things that have gone on. We are all aware of them. But then now there's a crisis when it's opioids and when it's young suburban white folks who are overdosing.
Yeah.
These are conversations and narratives where I see race coming into play. Now we're funneling all of these dollars into dealing with opiates because of who it's impacting. We have to have a real honest conversation about what that looks like, you know, when it hits the ground. And even in the treatment community, how are we working with and dealing with folks, meeting folks where they are when they have these criminal records because of their substance use? You know, how is providers handling those folks when we see them? You know, what kind of conversations are we opening up in therapy about this stuff? Folks have safe spaces to actually have conversations, and then for those of us who are, you know, really stepping out there on the margins, how are we holding each other accountable for the as for Black lives representing holding each other accountable in these spaces where we know things are happening, and what are we doing to change them? Those are, you know, like those are things that I'm bringing to this conversation, you know, and I'm hoping we can just have some dialogue about things that I hear about on a day-to-day basis,
Right,
from different people.
right. Your video froze a little bit there, but we're still hearing you. So I'm going to proceed. Yeah, I heard everything you said. So I mean, yeah, I'm getting, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I'm in 100% agreement. I think the bigger issue becomes, how do we convince other either white treatment providers, white policymakers, to see this from a different angle? And I've been asking every speaker who's been coming on in this series, like, if you could wave your magic wand and institute, I mean, I think we all know what we'd like to do for some kind of change, but then again, what's the pathway forward that you're seeing?
I definitely feel like more nations that are very candid and open, that allow people to really share to be heard. Because in a lot of spaces, you know, there's a lot of talk, but there's not a whole lot of listening.
Right.
So how do we promote more of these free spaces where folks are coming on and being vulnerable and being willing to share, this is my truth, this is what's happening to me, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is how I feel. I'm one person. I love that there are many people who are coming on your platform and that are sharing information. If I wave my magic wand around policy, I would love for policymakers to get in communication and collaborate with folks like Harm Reduction Coalition, with folks who are running syringe service programs. Get in conversation with folks and recognize that these are real people, so your policies have an impact on real people's lives. In regard to whether they're actively using drugs or whether they're abstaining from using drugs, they still matter, and they still belong to a family somewhere. They're somebody's, you know, even if they're just human. So it needs that person and cares about that person. And so we're like, we bring the human characteristics back to these discussions about laws and rules and regulations. And the third thing that I would say is, in our local communities, let's get out of the silos. Yes, we do have to have conversations as providers, but like what you're doing now, you are bringing a harm reductionist into a conversation where your primary followers are folks who are clinicians and folks like that,
Right.
to hear from each other.
Right.
You know, there's no one way. We have many conversations that include many people, and you know, we purport meaningful inclusion of people who use drugs. Let's hold some forums with people who are using drugs so that they can say what they
That's a good
need.
idea.
What do I need? Ask me what I need and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, what I need. Don't presume to know what's best for people.
You know, I want to run an idea by you, because I heard this last year from Pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber, who's one of my favorite like progressive preachers. And I cite it in Trauma and the 12 Steps that she said, I think our biggest drug of choice as people is thinking that we're better than other people. Isn't that good? Yeah.
Yes.
And I see so much of what happens with just the way that people of color can get demonized by white folks as being a symptom of that. I see the way that people who are on harm reduction getting demonized by people who are either in an abstinence path or a moral path fall prey to that. It's like, at least there's someone else we can pick on to feel better about ourselves.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, there's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
There is really no hierarchy. And again, I said this earlier, like, people are expert on their own lives. They have the answers. For me, it's about asking the question, and it's about the mic. Pass the mic. I'm not the right person to talk all the time. Right. You know, it's a person, but there are many other voices that don't get heard. And so I'm just like, what I'm modeling right now is opportunity. People who don't get these opportunities to talk have shared with me. So I didn't invent anything. I'm just sharing information. I feel like we have to create those conduits for information to get shared so we can be inspired, so we can learn, you know, we can hear from somebody other than ourselves all the time.
Right. And I think something I learned from you because of your work with reproductive justice previously, and I know that's still a part of who you are, is that giving an open platform where people feel they can share their stories without being shamed, I think is critical, not just for healing of the person sharing their story, but it's the way we can truly promote some kind of open shifting of the conversation. Because I don't think people are going to change their mind about harm reduction until they hear from people who it's actively working for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just like what we do with dancing mindfulness, of creating opportunity at the end of a class for people to just be complete, to share what's coming up for them, to listen, just to listen. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They want to be validated. And that's validated from the standpoint of, I feel you, I hear you, I see you, and not from the standpoint where we tend to take this power dynamic of, oh, I have power over you, so I can deem you to be good enough or not good enough. But just on a human level, one person to another, I see you, and you know, and I don't always understand, and it's okay, you know. But yes, definitely just creating spaces for people to share their truth, and not have to, you know, feel like I'm gonna snatch the microphone and start talking about myself.
Right. So you mentioned dancing mindfulness as something that helps with that process. So talk to me about any work you have done with dance or the expressive arts that has helped really facilitate this journey of authenticity and healing for people.
For sure. I recently, so I mentioned I'm overseeing this program called Help Connect, and we recently convened all of our grantees just before COVID-19 sort of took hold of the world, in Raleigh, North Carolina. And one of the things that I did in collaboration with the Faith and Harm Reduction leadership team, was to hold a dancing mindfulness class for people of faith who use drugs, because they're not different people. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People of faith who use drugs. Send out a
Yeah.
send out a
Yeah.
and it was all about, you know, recognizing that they're sacred, that they're whole, that they are beloved, and wanted to in that space to have an altar and anoint people and work on you know, opening up the communications where folks again are feeling validated and are being acknowledged in their full humanity and not demonized because of a behavior, right? Because we all got behaviors.
Amen. Amen to that.
And it was a wonderful experience. I've worked a lot with that community of folks. I'm an ordained minister. I don't share often because I curse too much, but hey, here's what it is. But it's been a really beautiful journey to work with folks with people who openly acknowledge their drug use, but that identify as people of faith. That's all types of faith, right? Not just Christianity, but all different walks of life. And it's been a really great experience to add dancing mindfulness to that. And folks are really excited about opportunities to be in community together where we meet regularly on a weekly basis. And so yeah, I've been able to integrate a lot of the expressive arts mediums virtually into that sharing, those gatherings. But that's just one example of many. But it's been wonderful to be able to add that, and people are looking for it, thirsty for it. And so we are looking for other ways to, you know, be even more creative with that.
So let me ask you this, because I know you are an astute observer of the human condition, a student of the human condition, and I'm impressed by your word thirsty. You know, and so just on a very human level, what is it that you see people are most hungry for, most thirsty for?
Three things: to be seen and experienced, and to be heard. To be seen, to be experienced, and to be heard. And what I mean by experience is to just be able to make audible my voice, to give me my voice back. People want to be able to speak whatever it is that is true for them and not have it judged, not have it silenced, not have it remixed. You know? But just to be, let me just say my stuff and have you just not do anything or try to fix it, or, you know. But yeah, see me, I'm here. And again, hear me. I have voice. Experience my whole person.
That's beautiful. And it's so simple, we miss it. So simple, we miss it. And I see you as somebody who, in whatever role you're working, in whatever medium you're using, you're giving people that, even if it's just in a very small way, it's still nourishing. And I think that's so valuable.
I told you when we met, I was doing dancing mindfulness before I knew what dancing mindfulness was. I didn't have language for what I was doing, but I knew that the Lord had been very specific with me about reaching people in a very specific way, and how I was going to reach them was going to be movement. It was going to be the arts, but I didn't have that vernacular. I didn't know about the brain and the amygdala and all of that at the tender young age of 12, and not even at the age of 21 or 31. Because I got started with this kind of later, but I'm thankful for the later, because I had so many experiences that have fed into this, and how I can see the connections for how I can use this as a tool in my tool belt. And I shared with somebody earlier today that I see expressive arts and dance and mindfulness is another tool on my tool belt that for some people, unfortunately, because of stress, trauma, or whatever, money, whatever it is, they don't access that. They don't, it's not, it's not real to you unless you know you can reach for it. And so my job as a facilitator, as a trainer, is to remind people to awaken that tool, that resource. We have it. I'm not teaching you anything you don't know how to do already.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
just reminding you that it's there.
Yeah, that's so imperative to my mission in doing this work, that none of us invented this. I mean, when people kind of cite me as creating dancing mindfulness, I mean, I say I put the community together, I put the concept together, but I mean, this is something that is in all of us already. I mean, I experienced it as a little kid before I knew it had a name. It's that thing that I think connects us, and what we're doing, especially when we come together in community, is we're affirming that for each other. The Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies, and there's that great teaching in there that you've had the answer in you all along. And the role that the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion and even the witches played for Dorothy was for her to find that, to reveal that. That you already, I know you used the term here, you already are whole. And it's just, I think the real trauma we experience is being separated from that truth.
Yes, yes, yes. And just menders, right? If we look at Christianity, we call Jesus the potter, right? He's putting us back together. So that's what we do that's what I feel that we do for people, is we help them put themselves back together.
That's beautiful.
There are, fissures and breaks, but we're there to just help them mend. Then they are mending themselves, though, right? It's not me. I'm not doing anything except helping you. Here's the clay. Here's a little water.
That's beautiful. And I think that's one of the reasons we get along so well.
Oh yeah, I'm eternally grateful to you for dancing mindfulness and for just embracing me and my wild ramblings. For how I can try this, in the world that's real for me.
I love it.
So
I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I thank you for joining us on the live cast tonight. How can people get in touch with you who might be listening and want to connect with you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook if you want to reach out to me, and
I'll tag you.
Yes, you can join. You can either friend me or you can join my Facebook group, Orisha Healing Arts Wellness and Spiritual Center, and Orisha is spelled Orixa. You can find my webpage, orishawellness.com, also Orixa. You can reach out to Jamie and she can connect
I'll put you in touch. Yeah.
And I'm on Instagram as well. So I mean, just look out for, just find me on any social media platform or Google my name, Orisha Bowers, and it'll show you something that'll get you in touch with me.
Great. And I'll make sure that I go ahead and tag the group, especially because that's a wonderful group that you keep. And just as a reminder for those of you who follow the Institute for Creative Mindfulness, on Thursday night at 6:30 Eastern, I'll be doing a special recovery themed yoga nidra to coincide with the release of the new book. And all of the things we do here are on recording. So whether it's Orisha's interviews with other folks we've had on here in this series and other series and meditations that we do every Thursday night, you can always access them here. And Dr. O, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Buy the book.
I will give it a quick shout out here. I have it with me, Trauma and the 12 Steps. And again, it is to me the essence of both and recovery. And I thank you. We didn't even plan on talking about that. Shows how in sync we are, because it's all about the both and. So, and until we meet again, Dr. O, thanks for being here.